Hey, this is Rob. This is episode 59 of the Folly Coffee Podcast. Let's get it brewing. I am here with Jake Underwood of Underwood Coffee out of Duluth, Minnesota. Here's the weird third person thing where I'm talking about you right in front of your face.
Yep.
But Underwood Coffee is a new roaster out of Duluth, founded by, of course, Jake Underwood.
Yep.
Excited to have you in, hear your story.
Thanks,
We know each other just through passing of your time at Spy House and just being back and forth with Phil Terra delivering cold brew and just the coffee scene. But I don't know much about your story. Like who the heck you were before that. Based on your Instagram, the things I do know is you're a big lover of natural wines.
Oh yeah, especially during quarantine.
Especially during quarantine.
Maybe a little too much.
Yeah. And obviously a very talented coffee roaster.
Thanks.
And so I would love to hear just how did you get your start in coffee? Because I don't think any two coffee people have the same story.
Yeah, man. I love hearing people's coffee stories. It's always fun. Mine's a little weird, I guess. I mean, I feel like most people's coffee stories, or at least a lot of them, are like, yeah, I was like an English major, and then like I worked at a cafe on the side, and yeah, I don't know, I couldn't do anything with my English major, so I'm doing coffee, which is cool. But like me, I was like essentially how I got into coffee. So I like quit smoking cigarettes. And
I already like the start.
and drinking like at the same time, like cold turkey. Yeah. Not that I had like a problem, but I was just like, I need to do something different with my life. And my girlfriend at the time, her parents bought me like a blade grinder and a French press and like a bag of like caribou coffee, like whole bean. And up to that point, I was just drinking like Keurig coffee, like medium roast. And then I just fired up with like a ton of sugar, a bunch of like powdered creamer. I don't know why I was doing the powdered creamer. And then I'd smoke like 100 cigarettes. And that was coffee to me. You know, it was just like fuel with like cream and sugar. And I was good to go with that. That's like as good as it got. So when I got this like French press and this grinder, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, this is crazy. But I like threw it together and I like made a cup of coffee and I drank it. And I was like, that's different. You know, like, why is it different? Like, this actually tastes like good. And then like I made another cup the next morning without like cream and sugar in it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is something a little bit more than I thought coffee was. Maybe I should explore this a little bit. Cause like I needed a vice, you know, cause like I wasn't smoking, wasn't drinking. Like I needed something to like focus my attention on. And so at that time I kind of started getting like a little bit more into it. And I was working at a company called Quality Bicycle Products out in Bloomington. And I was like building bikes. And like during the day we were allowed to like have our headphones on and listen to music and stuff. And I was like, I wonder if there's like a coffee podcast out there, you know? Full circle.
This is so meta right now.
Yep. And I stumbled upon one called the Portafilter Coffee Podcast by Nick Cho. Mm-hmm. No, I had no idea who he was at the time. I was just like, oh, cool, coffee podcast. Let's get it, you know? And so I started listening to that and I was like, this is awesome. Like I didn't know or understand a lot about what I was hearing on it, but I was like, this is interesting. And then I kind of did some more research and I started going to like cafes in town. And this is probably like 8, close to 9 years ago. Mm. So like customer service back then was a little different in like specialty than it may be now. And let's just say it was very intimidating. Like going into cafes, like not knowing anything. I'm sure you had like similar experiences.
That experience.
Because like I was just like a dirty punk kid. Like I didn't know anything. I was just like, I want to learn more about coffee.
And like, I was the opposite. I was a total bro, and they're like, this guy's not interested.
So like I'd go in, and like sometimes like people would be really cool and like helpful when I'd ask questions about like the coffees and stuff. And then other times people were just like totally dismissive and like, what? I don't care, dude. Like whatever. I think it doesn't help that I have like a smug face either. Like I think that just right off the bat, people are like, I don't know about this guy. But so like I just kept researching and learning, and then like YouTube is awesome, you know, for coffee stuff. And like I stumbled upon this company that no longer exists, but they're called Handsome Coffee Roasters. They're out of Los Angeles, California. They later got bought out by Blue Bottle Coffee. But their whole shtick, or at least what I got out of it back then, was like, yo, we're going to brew you something that's super delicious, and we're going to be nice to you. And like, to me, I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. Like cause up to that point I was just like, coffee shops are scary places. I'm just going to learn how to brew coffee at home. But once I saw that, I was like, okay, like there are people out there that like actually care about people like in this industry. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll learn a little bit more. And then, just kept like going down that rabbit hole with coffee. And then I kind of got to a point at the company I was working at where I was like, yeah, this is like a good job, but like I don't care about bikes. You know what I mean? And like I don't know what I want to do with my life. Like I'm just going to move to Alaska. So so I moved to Alaska for like a summer with my girlfriend at the time.
What made you pick Alaska?
I was watching a lot of like Discovery Channel, and there was like a lot of like Alaska shows and like Deadliest Catch and stuff. And I was like, man, Alaska's sick, you know? And like I grew up north in Duluth, so I was like, it's not too far of a stretch, you know.
Like that's practically Alaska.
Exactly, but there's like mountains and there's like more bears. So I was like, let's go to Alaska and like feel things out for like the summer, and then when we come back, I'm gonna like decide my next steps in life, you know. So went to Alaska and it was super cool. And when I was out there, I was like still ordering coffee like left and right from like new roasters like every week. That's like pretty much where all of my paychecks were going, was like buying coffee. And I ended up buying coffee from Ruby Coffee Roasters. Mm-hmm. And it was like when they were fairly new. This was like 7 years ago-ish, 7-8 years ago. And I had like just got a V60 and I like emailed Jared, the owner, and I was like, hey, I got a V60. I don't really know how to use it. Do you have like a good recipe? And he like emailed me back like right away. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like this guy owns his business and he's like emailing me right away, like trying to help me out. And then we like went back and forth a couple times. And then like a month later, he like followed up. He's like, hey man, how are things tasting? Like how's brewing going? And I was like, wow, like coffee's cool. Like there's people like this in the industry. Like maybe I should like actually do this, you know?
He's probably like, who the heck in Alaska found our coffee?
Yeah, exactly. I think I still have the bag. I'm like a hoarder with like old coffee bags. But yeah, so Alaska ended and then I moved back to Duluth where I'm from, and I went to Duluth Coffee Company and I basically just like begged for a job. And I sat down with Eric, the owner, and we had like a really good chat. His interviews are like super like laid back, where I think we just like drank a beer and he was like, so what's up with your life? And I was like, nothing, I want to do coffee. And then at the end of it, he was like, you know, it's super great talking to you, but we don't really have anything open right now, but you know, we're going to keep your name on file if something does. I was like, thanks man, appreciate it. And then like an hour later he called me. He's like, you know what? You seem super passionate. I really want to give you a chance. I'm going to go down to like 1 bar shift a week. So there's 1 shift already, and then like somebody else is like dropping a shift a week. So you have 2 shifts a week. And I was like, perfect, sign me up. So like I started with 2 shifts a week, and then like every day I wasn't working, I was still like there because I like wanted to be there. I wanted to learn. I wanted to talk to them about coffee. So like 2 shifts turned to like 3 shifts to 4 shifts. And then like, before you know it, I was working like 6 days a week, 6-7 days a week. I was there all the time. And that's kind of how I got into coffee. Oh, and then there was like the Big Central barista competition. That was like another thing. So like a week before I got the job at Duluth Coffee, it was like the last time they did the Big Central in Minneapolis. It was at like a boxing gym, and I like heard about it and I went to that and I was like, whoa, there's like coffee competitions. Like this is crazy. And I loved it. I was just like, I love like how everybody's like super intense and like focused, and it's like, this has to be perfect. Like no drips, like this, that, and the other. And that's like the mentality I had like going into coffee. I was like, everything has to be perfect. This is how everybody does it, you know? So I moved to Duluth and started working in coffee. And then, yeah, just kind of fell down that rabbit hole, man.
That first experience of finding like that competition is so exciting. But the weirdness to me was because I had the exact same experience you had, that I started getting interested in coffee, but you go into these shops and you're like, oh, I feel like such an asshole trying to ask questions. And, you know, I found the one barista at the shop that I liked that would be nice. And if they didn't work, if they weren't working, I would walk and order my thing and go. And if they're working, I'm like, hey, tell me about this, tell me about that. But then it's funny because you get to the competition side and everybody there is insanely friendly.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's going on here? How is it that we're in an industry where you walk into a high-end cafe and you're probably, you know, I do think it's changed since 5-6 years ago.
I think people figured out like, oh, right. Yeah, we should probably be nice to people.
And I was like, how is it that the cafe can be so intimidating, but these competitions are so, and it's like, oh, it's like a club. It's like once you're in, you're in. And if you're at a competition, you're clearly really interested.
Right.
And so that's what clicked for me, that I was like, oh, it's like if you can show them that you're into coffee, they'll be. And so what I started doing after that was like, just say one or two things about coffee before ordering, and they go, oh, okay. He's one of us. And I do think it's changed where people are like, oh, more people coming in here is good for everybody.
Yeah, probably.
And so you start working at Duluth.
Yep.
6-7 days a week. At this point, is it all barista shifts?
It's all barista shifts at that point.
And were you interested in roasting coffee at the time, or was it more the preparation of coffee that excited you?
For me, I kind of wanted to, like, in my head, like, do things right, like pay my dues. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to start.
I love that mentality, man.
Like, I wanted to start from the bottom. You know what I mean? Like, I want to wash dishes. Like, I want to learn, like, all the back of house stuff. Like, I want to learn how to, like, you know, like customer service. Like, I want to learn that stuff, and I want to learn how to prepare coffee really well before I take on any more responsibilities. You know what I mean? So, like, I started as a barista, and it was amazing. Like, God, I just think about, like, how much milk I wasted, because, like, I would go in there on my days off and just, like, latte art, like, it needs to be better. But Eric, the owner, was, like, super, like, hey, yeah, like, this is for you to, like, come in and play around, like, learn coffee. Like, I'm stoked to have you here. So that was great. And then I was there for about 3.5, 4 years. By the end, I was, like, the director of education and training, and just kind of got to a point where I was like, I kind of want to see what else is out there, like, in coffee. Like, I love Duluth Coffee Company. I love those guys, still do. But I was like, I need to, like, venture out and see what else is going on in coffee. So I moved back to Minneapolis at that point.
Duluth is such a killer coffee program up there.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know much about them just because I don't get up to Duluth that much.
Yeah.
And Jeff and I were like, let's do a planning meeting up in Duluth. And they brought us in for a cupping. We ended up hanging out for like 8 hours. And it was like
probably had everything. A couple beers.
Oh, yeah. And then it's like, all of a sudden we leave with like $150 of merch, and I'm like, what just happened?
Oh yeah, it's a whirlwind.
I'm like, oh man, I get it. But killer coffee program, awesome people up there. So I could see how that might happen. When you moved to Minneapolis, did you have something lined up, or you're just like,
yeah, man. So I kind of, I had a plan. I was like, all right, what I want to do is, like, I want to work in, like, another cafe in Minneapolis as, like, a barista, just to see how other people run their coffee programs. And then from there, I'm like, I'm going to get into roasting. So I applied at, like, two of my favorite shops. I applied at Angry Catfish, and I applied at Spy House. And Spy House never called me. So I had an interview at Angry Catfish, and it went super awesome. Like, I always loved that shop. Like, out of all the cafes in town, like, at that time, I was like, the customer service was always phenomenal. Everybody was always super nice. And then the coffees were amazing every time. You know, they were rocking Intelligentsia and Ruby, I think, at that time.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, I want to work here for sure. So it worked out, and I worked there. And I worked there in their sister cafe, Northern Coffee Works, for about a year or so.
What was it like transitioning from Duluth Coffee to a new program? Was it a lot of similarities, or was it hard to transition to a new program?
It was interesting because, like, I think, like, Duluth is so secluded with, like, their coffee culture, I guess, you know, because, like, there isn't really one in Duluth.
Yeah.
So, like, in my head, like, watching all these YouTube videos and, like, documentaries about coffee, I'm like, everybody that works in coffee is super intense about it. Like, everybody that works in coffee, like, wants to do this for their life. You know what I mean? And so, like, when I came to Minneapolis, I was like, that's everybody's mentality. Like, everybody that works here is like coffee, coffee, coffee. And, like, everybody that worked there, like, cared about doing a good job. But a lot of people were like, I'm just going to school. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to do this forever. Like, this is a good job, but, like, I don't care about this, like, SL28 from Costa Rica. Like, that's neat, but, like, I'm whatever. Like, I just want to serve good drinks and be nice to people. So, cool. So that was, like, a good shock to me, I guess, where I was like, all right, not everybody is as intense about this as I am, and that's okay. You know what I mean? But it was an amazing coffee program that they had set up there. You know, like, they worked with Intelligentsia, so they had, like, access to, like, their training and stuff like that. So I kind of got a taste of all, like, that world of, like, Intelligentsia and, like, how they operate and their, like, wholesale program. And Yeah, it was super awesome. Yeah.
How long of a time was there between your time at Angry Catfish, Northern Coffee Works, and your first time on machine starting to roast?
Oh, boy. So after Angry Catfish, Northern Coffee Works, I actually worked at Mill City Roasters for like a minute.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For a really brief time. It was cool. It just didn't work out. Like I realized pretty shortly into that where I was like, I need to be like in a cafe setting, like production roastery.
Yeah, Mill City Roasters, for anybody listening that doesn't know, is a company that produces the actual roasting machines up in Northeast Minneapolis.
Yep. And they're awesome. They're super cool and they're really understanding. So, I mean, from Angry Catfish to Northern, to Mill City, I left Mill City, applied at Spy House again, and they called me this time. And they're like, hey, do you want to come in for an interview? And then I did. And I told them up front, I was like, hey, I'll be a barista to start, but I really want to get into the roastery. That's where my passion is. That's where I'm going. And they're like, yeah, there's nothing open right now, but we got shifts for you if you want to be a barista. I was like, awesome. So started as a barista at Spy House. And then about a month in, I got a call from another company in town that was like, hey, we're starting our own roasting program. Do you want to come over and be the roaster? And I was like, because I just started at Spy House, and I was like, that's kind of a dick move if I start here and then go do this, but it's I want to roast. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to roast. Yeah, sign me up. And then the next day, Tony Querio from Spy House is like, hey, we have a spot opening up in the roastery. We know that you are planning to move on, but this is where you'd start. You'd start as a production assistant. You wouldn't be on the machine right away. But he's like, if we could get there eventually. And I was like, oh boy, Sophie's choice, because I had greatly admired Tony as a person even before working at Spy House, and to me, he's one of the best roasters in the country.
Yeah, you've got this conundrum of you could on paper skip a few steps and start roasting right away for a brand new program that has no established reputation.
Yep.
Versus a program that's nationally renowned with obviously
former U.S. roaster champ.
Yeah, a lot of things going on. That's all right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it goes back to me, I got to pay my dues, I don't want to just be handed this thing. So it was tough because I had to tell people that I really care about, hey, I got to pass on this thing. I'm going to try this thing at Spy House. So took the job, and then within a couple months, I was the production manager. And then by the end of my time at Spy House, I was the head roaster. So
how long of a period was that?
I was at Spy House for about 2 years.
Dang. What was it like from having never roasted before? Was it what you expected?
Yes and no. I mean, it was I had been around roasting a lot, especially at Duluth Coffee because they roasted in the cafe.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what I was doing was production roasting, which is essentially following, tracing a line, following the curve and learning mechanics of a machine. And then the more essentially the beginning of it wasn't even roast theory or learning much about roasting. It's just learning mechanics, which is essentially the same as when most people are training in new baristas. You don't need to understand why things are happening. You just need to follow directions in the beginning to get an end result.
There's the really comparable thing in craft beer where I come from, where it's everybody pictures the brewer as this sexy position that's oh, cool. It's what's in the commercial. It's what all the videos are about. It's there's one head brewer who's making new recipes. By the way, not that many new recipes. Yeah. If you have a good business, you probably have one or two beers that are driving most of your business, and then the other stuff is kind of just rotating and for fun. And I found it to be really similar in coffee, where a lot of people are oh my God, roasting would be such a sexy. It's same with barista.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously there's those moments where it's this is beautiful. You know what I mean? You get a coffee and you're wow, that's amazing. But I mean, a lot of it's just labor.
Here's the curve. I know how to adjust it to keep it along that curve. And I've been trained enough to know which variables to manipulate to keep it along this curve.
I mean, exactly. And I mean, as time went on, Tony would like give me more little snippets of like, this is what we're looking for, like taking on more of like having like influence on how we roasted coffees. So yeah, it was crazy.
Was that kind of your experience all the way up to head roaster? And even at head roaster, were you doing more of the kind of discovery of new coffees, or was that still along the lines of production?
A little both. I mean, it was a lot of just like working with Tony on like stuff like, hey, we're getting these coffees in, like what should we do with them? You know? So, I mean, it was great.
Now you have Underwood.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you go from Spy House to now having fully launched officially.
Yeah. Yeah. We're up and running.
Underwood Coffee, underwoodcoffee.com, right?
There we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'll put it in the show notes so it'll be readily available. What happens between your time there and Underwood that made this all come together?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's always been kind of like the end goal to do this, you know, like do my own thing. I come from like a long line of like entrepreneurs in my family, like my grandfather and his brother, and they're all like independent truck drivers, right? So they all own like their own trucking companies, worked for themselves most of their lives. So like at a very young age, that was kind of like instilled in me. It's like, oh yeah, you should work for yourself. Why would you want to work for anyone else?
It's so funny that like that's truly to me what entrepreneurship is. And now this word has been taken by like the hashtag hustle every day. The crew, which I've definitely been accused of being that before, and maybe I deserve a little bit of that. But to me that's more true entrepreneurship, where it's like, oh, I do this thing really well, I should sell this directly to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it took a long time for me to be like confident enough to be like, all right, I know enough. Like, I know I can do this and do a good job.
That is so key though. 'Cause going back to craft beer, you see people make like a solid homebrew.
Yeah. And they're like, let's go.
They get silver medal in a good homebrew competition. And they're like, I'm a brewer now, let's go. And then they get to the commercial scale and like,
it's a different world.
Launching commercial is basically a magnifying on your skill, magnifying glass on your skill set. And if you don't know every in and out of how this thing works, it's going to show. And something like coffee, where like, as I know, and as I'm sure you know, the people who are really into it will dissect what you're doing beyond what you would ever imagine.
Oh yeah. That was me. Like, you know what I mean? Like forever I'd taste people's coffees and I'd be like, oh yeah, I know. I see what happened there.
Yeah.
You know? And now it's like, I do that stuff. Like when I get new coffees in, like I'm never, one thing I've learned is like, I'm never going to be happy. Like with anything I put out, like fully. With every coffee, it's like, yeah, I could have done something different there. You know what I mean? But like everyone around me is like, yeah, that's great. It's perfect. Like, I love it. It's so good. What are you talking about? It's like, nah.
The people that will tell you that what they're doing is perfect and they've reached it they're never the ones that actually is the best. It's kind of the catch-22 that you're like, if you could be happy with what you're doing over time, it will absolutely degrade the quality of what you're doing because you won't want to make it any better.
Yeah, you got to keep chasing it, you know?
So at what point did it become that you wanted to do this to actually pulling the trigger on doing it?
Oh, wow. So, I mean, I had the logo made up in like 2016. So I got a little ahead of it.
So it's really been in mind.
Yeah. But I mean, really, I kind of had like a checklist of things I wanted to do in coffee before I was like, let's go. And like one of the last things I wanted to do was like visit a coffee producing country. And pretty much almost exactly a year ago now, I was in Peru. So Spy House sent me to Peru to like buy coffee and like meet producers. And it was incredible, right? And after that, like I came back and I was like, all right, I did it. Like, check. I got to start planning now. So at that point I like picked up a second job and I was working full time at Spy House. And then I was working part-time at a liquor store.
This explains the natural wine. Okay.
Yeah.
That was the last puzzle piece
by our house. So I was working quite a bit there, saving up. And then, quarantine happened and everything shut down. And so for a minute there, I was freaking out. I was like, we're not going to be able to do this right now. So I have a partner in the business. My girlfriend, Sam, and I own it together. So we were like both looking at each other in our apartment, like, yeah, we're going to have to probably hit pause here for a minute. 'Cause like neither of us can work, you know, we both went from like full time, like working 2 jobs, whatever, to like nothing. So we were just kind of hanging out and then like, you know, unemployment kicked in and we started getting that extra $600 a month and we started like saving and everything kind of still lined up according to our plans, if not better, because of that time. Because we had more time to like just work on our business plan.
So in a very weird way, the timing worked out really nicely.
Yeah.
I've heard this from a couple of people
really
that
strange.
they're like, the uncomfortable truth about the situation is that this has kind of helped me with it for people who were like, time was the biggest thing they were lacking.
Oh, for sure.
And the approach to making the decision, this might be like the most analytical approach I've heard to starting a business I've ever heard. And like, having a list of things that before I do my own thing, here's a literal checklist of things that need to happen to start it. But that's so smart because so many people, they go, oh, I've got this idea. I want to wait until the time is right. Mm-hmm. And here's, if you didn't have that checklist of things and you can go back on, no, I decided this a long time ago. Here's the checklist.
Right.
If you didn't have that, when quarantine hit and the pandemic hit, your gut is obviously not going to scream, this is the perfect time. So you might have been like, oh, I'll just wait the 2 weeks that this pandemic will happen for this to be over and then start it then.
Oh, boy. Yeah. And I mean, I knew I was kind of like, all right, with our model, like we're not opening a cafe. You know what I mean? Like most of our sales, it's going to be online and wholesale. What better time than when everybody's at home ordering coffee? So like it's worked out for us.
Yeah.
You know, like there's pros and cons obviously to everything.
Yeah. Anyone who's listened to me talk ever has been like, Cafe Wednesday coming. I'm like, probably never.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I'm telling you, if coffee is what you're passionate about, I can to this day not remember who gave me this advice. There's a period of time where I was meeting with maybe like 2 or 3 people a day. Mm-hmm. Just like, I need to know everything about coffee. And the best advice I got, and I cannot remember who it was, they're like, if you're going to start roasting coffee, either start a cafe first or a roaster first, and then decide later if you want to do the other thing. Right. And I was like, well, it's the coffee that I'm pumped about. The coffee is what I get excited about. Then they're like, roast first. Figure out later if you want to do the cafe. Because then at least if you roast first and you do a cafe later, you're not out hundreds of thousands of dollars if that thing doesn't work.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for us too, like we want to help like other people that have cafes or are opening cafes, like improve their programs or like start the programs. Like we offer consulting and training, you know?
You saying just walking into Angry Catfish, here's something that I think gets undervalued by cafes so much. Okay. Mm-hmm. You walk in Angry Catfish. The first thing you notice as a person who loves great coffee, oh, shit, they got Intelligentsia and Ruby here. This is a good shop.
Yeah.
And they have to prove you wrong otherwise.
Right.
Versus most people want a private label. Well, we need our own brand of coffee.
Yeah.
So you walk into a place that's got one location that you've never been before. You know nothing about it. You see they have their own brand of coffee and you're still neutral.
Yeah.
I'm like, that right there is like such a valuable piece. And like, what you're saying is exactly what I'm trying to say is like, I don't need a cafe because I want to find people who are passionate about that and have them serve our coffees.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. Like I can't imagine having a cafe and doing the roasting right now. That just seems nuts. Like Eric did it at Duluth Coffee and like, I don't know how, cause like he was working bar shifts and then like roasting and like going out and selling coffee and delivering coffee. And it's like, I'm having like, my days are filled enough with just like roasting and trying to sell coffee.
Yeah. We're doing tours on the weekend and we have like a staff of like 6 people, 4 working at a time. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to schedule out the next month. When do I have time to do this?
Yeah.
And so to have a staff of like 50 plus baristas while also trying to stay engaged with what you're doing on a coffee perspective.
Right.
So you're now on unemployment. You've got time now.
Oh yeah.
What are your steps at this point?
Oh boy. Drank a lot of coffee, watched all the Star Wars movies.
Natural first step.
Yeah. And I mean, worked on the business plan and just started like planning and chipping away at things, you know, like, all right, we're going to need somewhere to roast. Where are we going to roast? Should we buy a machine we're going to outgrow in like 6 months? Or should we like talk to Eric at Duluth Coffee Company? So I hit up Eric and we met. We actually met before everything shut down because like I told him like, hey, I'm moving back home to do this. And he was like, hey, let's talk. So I was like, we're doing this. And he's like, you can just roast out of the cafe.
That's sick.
And I was like, cool, man. Like, do you want me to pay you? He's like, just give me a case of beer every now and again.
I wish I had that deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, Eric has been like a mentor, boss, and now just like a really good friend. Like he's helped us out so much. And I mean, that's just kind of his MO. He just wants to like see other people succeed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I think he understands like rising tides lift all ships.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in that. And hopefully it doesn't come across as phony, but that's how I believe that. Again, third time I've referenced craft beer this episode, but there's so many parallels. There's a lot of different food and beverage things, but craft beer and coffee just seem to share the symbiotic relationship. And what craft beer did really well, I'm a broken record, I know, but what craft beer did really well is craft breweries didn't go drink my beer.
Yeah.
They said drink craft beer. And so people went out and started drinking all the craft beers. And then people realized, oh, you know how many people only drank light beer before this? Almost all of them.
Yeah.
And so when I look at coffee, I'm not going, oh man, if I have a customer go drink Underwood coffee, I'm going, no. That means if someone has drank Underwood coffee, that means they're a fan of great coffee. That means that they're probably going to appreciate what we're all doing. And the population of people to attract is someone who's never had this great cup, someone who's a loyal Starbucks drinker, someone who's you getting your first blade grinder with a French press and getting a thing of caribou and going, oh, this tastes better already.
There's something else going on here. And I mean, the beer parallel, totally. I see that stuff all the time. And like, I use this analogy a lot where I'm like, all right, so like there's a new burger place in town, right? You hear they have a great burger, right? So you go there and you're like, oh, this is a really good burger, right? I love this burger. And then you go somewhere else and that's a burger place. And you hear like, oh, it's a great burger. You got to go check it out. You go there and it's like exactly the same burger you just had. You're like, yeah, this is really good, but I thought this was going to be different, you know? So like if there's like only one coffee roaster in a town and they're everywhere, aren't you going to get kind of bored drinking the same coffee everywhere you go? Wouldn't it be more fun if there was a different burger place that maybe put bacon on their burger? I don't know.
This reminds me of this awesome case study that I read about Coke and Pepsi. And I've always, like, you just kind of notice it and you never think about it, but you go, why is it that every time there's a Coke machine, like just a soda dispensing machine, every time there's a Coke machine, there's a Pepsi machine right by it? Who would allow that? If you've got one, who would allow there to be another machine there? This doesn't make any sense. And you just not really think about, whatever, they're both there, I have options. Well, the case study found that, okay, so if you have a Coke machine and you have a Pepsi machine next to it, both are going to sell more.
Yeah.
So the amount of Coca-Cola you would sell out of a Coke machine is less than the amount of Coca-Cola you would sell if there's a Pepsi machine right next to it. And also that Pepsi machine is going to sell more than that original Coke machine. And that to me is like the absolute like definition of the rising tide, rising all ships, is both Coke and Pepsi are happy because people are more likely to get something if they have a choice.
Yeah, it's nice to have options.
And so when the question is not yes or no, the question is like which one, they're more likely to get one. And so I want there to be as many options of great coffee as possible so that people are like, which great coffee should I get?
Yeah. What am I in the mood for today?
Yeah. And if you get enough people, I call them converts from the, your chain coffee. Once you get enough of these converts over to this, there's enough room for everybody.
Oh, for sure.
And I know the craft beer bubble's happening now, and there is an oversaturation, and like there is a point, but with coffee, I don't even think we're close to being there.
No way.
Especially when you look at like Duluth, crazy.
There's so much room, I think. You know what I mean? Like Duluth is a small town/city, but like I saw, like growing up there, like I saw all these like new breweries come in. Like for a long time, it was just like Lake Superior Brewing and like Fickers. Those were like the local craft brews, right? And then now there's like Bent Battle, Ursa Minor, like Earthrider. Like there's so many breweries, right? And like you said, like what they all do well is like, oh, you like this beer? You got to go check out this sour over at so-and-so's. It's like they all feed off of each other. And now people like make trips to like go to Duluth to go like check out like beer tours, you know? There potentially someday could be that kind of same vibe for coffee where people are like, oh, I'm going to Duluth to check out, Underwood and Almanac and Duluth coffee. Like, yeah. So, I mean, we're banking on that. There's room. We're hoping so.
Yeah. When you're starting to build out the business plan and doing these final steps, how long did it take you from really starting to be like, we're going to launch this thing seriously now to actually the full launch, which happened fairly recently, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, like the 10th, I think we launched.
Of October.
Yeah. Yep. Boy, I'd say about a year.
Here's the other, I was just thinking about this in the whole process of launching. Here's another benefit of wholesale only and not having a cafe is, guess what? Where you're roasting now already has all the proper licensing in place to be able to roast coffee.
That was really nice. Yeah. And with the Department of Ag, that was a really nice, easy inspection.
That saves a lot of stress and a lot of things that's where all those hidden expenses are. There's just small little things that you never think about needing, especially with coffee, with like afterburners and all these different certifications you may need depending on where you're at.
It's wild. And I mean, luckily, I've been doing coffee for so long that I've seen other people run into those things where it's like, all right, you got to really deep dive into that build out and make sure everything is covered before you bring people in.
And with your program, so now that you've launched, how did you decide which coffees you're going to launch with? And like, I know it's different blended names, but you also have straight up single origins available. How did you decide what to name your blends, what flavor profile they should have, and which ones to offer upon your launch?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing with Underwood is like, I always wanted to kind of create like my ideal coffee company that could also be like approachable to everyone, you know? And I know that there's like a lot of coffee companies out there that like preach like, oh, we're inclusive, we're approachable, everyone's welcome, right? And then you go there and you just feel like poor and dirty. And you're not supposed to be there. So they're trying to be approachable and inclusive to a very specific crowd. As what we're trying to do is like, no, like really, we don't care who you are. As long as like you're cool, we want you to buy our coffee and enjoy it. So with the menu, I wanted to start out with like really approachable coffees that could be versatile. So like pretty much we have the Columbia Wheeler, which is like a regional select coffee from Cafe Imports.
That's what I'm drinking right now.
Yep, who I've known and worked with for years. And that coffee, I knew immediately, I was like, I want to have this Columbia, and then I want to have like a natural Ethiopia on the menu, or cherry dried Ethiopia, sorry. And so because like that coffee is always going to be like one of those coffees that gets people going like, whoa, like I didn't know coffee could taste like this.
This is my literal first cup of natural Ethiopia.
Yep.
I noticed you said cherry picked. Is this something I'm behind on?
Well, cherry dried is something I got from Tony at Spy House.
Okay.
And his reasoning behind it, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of like, calling a naturally processed coffee natural, a consumer sees that who doesn't know what it really is, and they get preconceived notions. They're like, oh, it's natural, it's better,
it's organic,
it's better for you. And so he's like, it's cherry dried, which I mean, literally it is. It's dried in the cherry.
Smart.
You know, and that way there's no like, oh, it's natural, it's better. And then somebody gets in there like, I don't really like that. Or they just, you know, it goes down that rabbit hole of like, there's so many gray areas in coffee.
Yeah.
You're like naming things.
No, I noticed that. It's super smart. Yeah. I mean, like I intuitively knew what you meant, but I was like, oh, interesting.
Right.
I want to know the meaning behind that.
And then, so like, I knew the Columbia was going to do well because who doesn't love like a classic Colombian coffee? And then the Ethiopia, I wanted that one to kind of like as an eye opener coffee. And then I knew I was like, all right, I could use these two coffees for a blend. And we're using that blend as like an omni roast, I think a lot of people call it, where it's going to taste great on drip, and you can also brew it as espresso, and it's going to be phenomenal. You know, it's developed enough to like handle that.
Picking up new terms. I like this. Yeah. I feel like I've heard that, but I think that's the first time I've heard someone say it to me. Omni roast.
It's a weird one.
Yeah.
It's whatever. And then
also the name of my metal band.
Yeah. Speaking of metal, so our darkish roast, Unhollowed, is actually named after an album by a metal band called the Black Dahlia Murder. It was their first record. It was called Unhollowed. And I don't know, it just seemed fitting.
That's awesome.
For that coffee, I was like, I just want to have like a mean sounding like darkish roast name. So that's what we came up with for that one. And then for Little Arrow, originally, pretty much almost like 2 weeks before we launched, Little Arrow was going to be called Slapshot. And I don't know how I didn't catch it earlier, but I was like, I'm just going to search Slapshot Blend again, one more time. And then I found out that there's like a roastery in New York that has like a Slapshot Blend. And they have like enough of a following where I was like, I can't use it now. But I was like, this is going to kill up north, Hockey Town, Slapshot. But then I was like, all right, playing around with a couple other blend names. And I was like, Little Arrow, that sounds fun. And that Little Arrow is like a Big Thief song.
Okay.
By the band Big Thief. I was like, yeah, it looks kind of cute. Sounds fun. Little Arrow. So that's how we got to there. And with the blend, I just, I wanted it to be approachable, comforting, like those flavors that are just like classic and that like everyone likes, like cherry. Like who doesn't like cherry fudge and like almond? It's like the best combo.
Yeah.
In my mind.
And do you have like a longer term vision of where you'd like to take it? Or is this kind of the long term variety that you would always like to have with Underwood?
I think we'll probably have like these staple coffees like on the menu. And then like as things kind of progress, I'm going to add some more like single producer coffees on the menu. It's just I kind of wanted to launch with these and really get to know kind of where I wanted to take these coffees before introducing any new ones, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to get used to like this new machine that I'm roasting on. I wanted to get used to these new coffees and get people kind of familiar with our brand with these kind of staples before I sprinkle in these other more wild exotic coffees.
What machine are you roasting on up there?
Roasting on a 12 kilo US Roaster Corp.
And how's that been transitioning from your time at Spy House to that machine?
Very different.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's crazy. So that Spy House machine was like a 1950s, like refurbished UG22 cast iron drum. Beast of a machine. To going to this like double steel walled smaller US Roaster Corp machine. The way that they take heat on is completely different. So like I was just like burning a ton of coffee initially because like charge temps were too high, because like stainless, like you turn the gas on and it's just like push hits it, rather than like cast iron, it like slowly soaks in that heat. So yeah, I was roasting some bad coffee for a while, but luckily I have tons of friends and family up north that, choked it down. So there was a little learning curve there with that new machine. I'm not ashamed.
Yeah, and that's so key that you had the time built in for that. Yeah, I've seen people get new roasters and be like, all right, the new roaster's in. Let's start selling again, or let's start selling. And you're like, oh, you should got to build in time to roast on that new machine. Like every temperature probe is different. Every machine roast is so different, because even Jeff was like looking at some graphs and talking to some people about charge temps, and he was like, wait, what do you charge it at? What? And he's like, well, I'm like 40 degrees higher. And they're like,
every machine's different.
Like, it's the machine. You're not actually charging 40 degrees higher on a similar coffee than we are.
Yeah.
What is your take on light, medium, dark roast in terms of how to like label them and how to communicate that to customer? Because that is something I'm trying to figure out myself.
I kind of just don't.
Thank you.
Like I just kind of let the coffees speak for themselves. I mean, I even like flavor notes, I don't know how I feel about them yet. Like we have them on the bags, but things could change. Like I don't know. I think they're kind of nice as like a reference where people are like, oh yeah, fudge, cherry, almond, cool. But like when people are like, what is this, a light roast, dark roast? It's like, all of our coffees are going to be roasted around like light to medium, to be properly developed. We're trying to get the most out of each coffee.
And it's a tough thing to do, because there are people who are like, well, which is it though? And
you're
like,
they want like a definitive answer.
So it's like a medium. You're like, yeah, whatever. Sure. It's like a medium, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's something we're trying to figure out. And we did a dark roast, and then we did a Halloween really dark roast. And I was like, even the Halloween dark roast, for us, this is the darkest we'll ever roast a coffee. Like you still can taste the quality of the coffee under it, but any darker and you're not tasting anything. And that to us is like, this is super dark, but it was like just hitting second crack when we dropped it.
Yeah.
And so for some people, that's like their medium roast. It's like just hitting second crack.
Right. It's just, it's so subjective.
So it's more confusing to me to try to label stuff. I don't know, but that's something that I think customers, once they figure it out, that's like, oh, that's all made up. And
it's just,
I think there's a sweet spot for every coffee. For like every bean, there's a sweet spot where you go, this is where it tastes the best, and that's where we roast it. And most people go, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to, like, if I was talking to someone, probably from an older generation, I might say like more of like a northern Italian style roast. Mm-hmm. And I'm stealing this from like Andrew Barnett from Linea Cafe out in San Francisco. He's been in the game forever. One of my favorite roasteries in the country. But like northern Italy, like the style of roasting there is like more on like the light medium side rather than like southern Italy. I think it's like where you get that like super dark Robusta.
Just the black bean where you're like, that is literally dark.
Yep.
Like, looking at those, you're just like the smoky. This is a bold smoky profile that we roasted this one.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like throughout my career, like I've gone kind of like all over the map where I'm like, oh, I'm super into like this super like Nordic light roast, like it's super tea-like and like aromatic and floral, and then now where I'm at, it's like I kind of like a more developed coffee, you know, a little more caramelized sugars and like some sweet, like a lot of sweetness, and that's what I'm into.
I think most people, that's where they land.
Yeah,
because
full circle.
Because it's like the super light, high acid coffees are interesting and fun.
Yep.
But then you're like, oh, I have a full 12-ounce bag of this. A cup of this every single day is like, then you have that for a few days in a row, and you go back to like a nice develop with some good caramelization, like just a good sweet cup of coffee. You're like, oh, thank God, this is so nice.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like I kind of went through like a similar thing with like beer, where like, you know, I drank like crappy beer, and then I got into like, oh, I need this like double IPA and this like stout and whatever, and now it's like I just want to drink like High Life, you know. It's consistent, it's good every time.
Every craft brewery now has landed at like light lager. This is our best sellers now. You're like, because it's refreshing and delicious,
and you can drink a bunch of it.
Exactly. And that's how we try to approach it too, is like, we love these coffees, we love roasting them, these are fun. But our classic Joe, this is what most people, this is our volume driver. This is what people buy. This is what people really like. And even Jeff, like, I have to tell him, hey man, don't like, careful of how you use your words when you're describing classic Joe, because you make it sound super boring. But you need to go back to the first time you ever had a decent cup. For somebody that's only had bad coffee, and then they have that nice sweet, they go, wait a second, this isn't bitter.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah, smooth.
Yeah,
that's like the biggest flavor descriptor you hear, you know, from like people who don't really know coffee. They're like, oh, it's so smooth. Yeah, so smooth, which is like we kind of worked that into like our branding with like the rough hands make smooth coffee.
Dude, your branding is so awesome. Like that logo is so cool. Who did your logo and all that?
Luke Leesky, who is an artist and tattoo artist down here.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's just like I love the branding. It's so cool, and like the tagline, "Rough hands make smooth coffee." I wanted my like like Maxwell House, like good to the last drop. Like I wanted to have something that people could see and be like, oh yeah, that's Underwood Coffee. Yep. Yeah, and what I love about that is it's like true to your story. That even every place you go, you're like, I want to start from scratch. I want to work my way up, and basically, I want to earn what I'm about to do. And especially in the age today where people are like, I think I'm going to start a coffee roaster. Have you roasted? No, but I have an Instagram now, so I'm a coffee roaster. And then they try to like, they start to roast coffee, and they're like, I have a coffee roaster. And that it's tough, because I face it all the time when you tell somebody I have a coffee roasting business, and they're like, okay. Yeah. Just like, people, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just like, it's not that hard to start roasting coffee and selling it. It's pretty, there's totally some affordable machines out there that you could do what you do and go to a local roaster and say, hey, can I start roasting on your machine? But I think the key to why I think, well, first of all, your coffee is great. Like this is even just this Columbia Wheela, very simple coffee. Yeah, like the flavors you're getting out of it are really nice. There's good natural sweetness, some of that like cherry undertone. There's things that are difficult to bring out in what is kind of a simple coffee. Yeah, but people just want to skip all those steps and hear your story. They want to hear your story and be like, oh, so I could go to a roaster, pay them to use their machine, and now I have a coffee roasting business. And he's like, kinda.
Yeah. I mean, people can do it. Like, I mean, look at Blue Bottle. Yeah. I think that guy did a lot for like people who were just like, oh, I mean, look at Blue Bottle. They're huge. Like they got bought by Nestle. Like, I mean, he was just like a classically trained musician who was like, I'm going to start roasting coffee. And then he did. Like, you know, no prior experience.
And I'm super guilty that's how I thought I was going to start Folly. I'm like, I'll just learn how to roast coffee and I'll be the roaster. And so I got an Aleo Bullet R1. I started roasting, made a couple of good batches. Like, I could do this. Yeah. And then I roasted the same coffee and it turned out super different. Sometimes also good, sometimes terrible. And I'm like, oh, if I'm going to learn this, it's going to take years and years of work. Yeah. But I think the timing is now in my life and in the industry. And honestly, it's the end product that I'm most passionate about. And that's where I found Ken. I was like, okay, here's a person who can do it. And I think too many people don't want to put in the work or admit that I'm not the person to do this.
I mean, it all depends on the person or person's like mentality, you know? Like I don't know. Like before coffee, I kind of assumed I was just going to be working like labor jobs forever, you know? Yeah. And like that was fine. You know, it's just how I grew up. It's like, you just work.
But that mentality, everybody thinks that these are like sexy jobs. Like, oh, a coffee roaster, this is a sexy job. And it's like, not if you're roasting a lot of coffee, because 95% of it is not the sexy sourcing a new coffee and dialing it in and bringing out these flavors and discovering a new coffee. That's like once maybe 4 times a year on each type of coffee you serve. Most of it is what you were talking about, production roasting, and it's a grind.
You got to love that stuff, though. You have to enjoy that kind of like not mundane, but like that repetition.
Yeah, the repetitive nature
filling
of it.
Bag after bag of coffee. You know, like scooping green coffee when you're allergic to it, which I am. I found that out in a really fun way when I broke out in hives.
Break out in hives every time you're scooping greens?
No, that just happened once. But I mean, now I wear a mask every time, and otherwise it's just like I get super congested, like sneezing like crazy, like my eyes, I just like look like I'm crying. And
that happened, and you're like, I'm doing the right thing here.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
You gotta love it.
What's kind of your strategy of getting people to figure out about you? Getting people to the website, of figuring out what Underwood is.
So we're pushing Instagram really hard. Mm-hmm. Like we're pretty active on there and Facebook, and just trying to get the word out through that. And otherwise we're slowly chipping away at trying to pick up some more wholesale partners. Mm-hmm. It's just, I kind of wanted to start slow and steady. Yeah. My biggest fear is I don't know how to say it without sounding arrogant, is that we were going to be too successful too fast.
It's a very, very good concern to have.
You know, where I just didn't want to be while we were still learning all of the back end stuff of accounting and keeping track of books. I kind of wanted to slowly build into these things before taking off with a ton of accounts.
People are like, oh, you should prepare for the worst case scenario. And I go, that doesn't just pertain to if nobody buys it. What if more people than expected, and then you have bad service? That's also would end up business. And
exactly.
It's you don't really want to outwardly say it I'm worried about having too many sales, and people would never feel bad for you. But when you stretch beyond your own capabilities, it's equally devastating to a business as if you can't find a customer to buy it.
Right. Because right now it's just me and Sam doing everything. And I mean, she's working full time. At a floral boutique, and then she does vintage resale too. So she's really busy. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, a lot of it is just me running around, trying to do everything and slowly trying to figure out how to manage our time the most efficiently as we can before things start to really ramp up. Cause we still have to find our own space too, within the next 6 months to a year. Cause I feel we're going to outgrow Duluth coffee pretty quick. So
it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, but I mean, it's scary.
So we'll end on this. What is a natural wine?
Ooh,
and is there a term like cherry dried that you apply to those wines as well?
I mean, I feel bad talking about natural wine because I really don't know everything. I don't know a ton. I mean, if somebody asked me what a natural wine was, I'd say it's just a minimal intervention wine. Most conventional wine, there's things added in the process to make it hit a certain profile. With natural wine, it's just fermented grape juice thrown in a bottle, and what you get is what you get. And I mean, there's ways to coax things to get a good product. I'm not just saying they're just let it go. I mean, some people are, but it's very minimal intervention. It's just people just like,
my understanding of wine is that the yeast is naturally occurring on the skin of grapes, because that's like the white kind of if you ever see like a unwashed grape, isn't that what like the white residue on the outside of a grape is, like naturally occurring yeast?
Yep. So like with conventional wine, they add like artificial yeast or like other yeast and like sugars and like crazy things.
Like here's an efficient yeast that's going to get us a good yield.
Yep. To get like a good solid profile. With natural wine, it's more about like quality, like picking like, I mean, similar like parallels to coffee, where you're only picking like ripe cherries at certain times and like really watching things closely. And like every vintage is different, which I think is fun. Like every bottle to bottle, you can find like differences, and like it's wild.
I try to picture the first person that like squeezed a bunch of grapes, got the juice out, let it sit out for a little too long, and started foaming, and they're like, let's drink it's a little foamy, but I think I'll drink it. And then they drink it, and like the first person that got drunk off wine probably thought that was forever.
Yeah.
Like, what? Oh my God, this is what life is like now.
Oh boy.
But so that's what a natural, that's I never knew that.
More or less. I mean, it's just,
is the flavor profile, is there like a distinct, so obviously with like natural coffees, you go all very fruit forward. Is there kind of a flavor profile of natural wines versus a more like commercial example?
I mean, you're going to find a lot of differences. I mean, it depends on like the varieties of the wine. Like if you have like a rosé or like a juicy like Syrah or whatever. I mean, there's so many different variances, but you can find like an oaky cab that like is a natural wine. You know, it's all about like what the producer did at the farm level, really, with the wine when they harvested. Wine's kind of crazy.
That's a rabbit hole.
It's a huge rabbit hole. Like I'm not even like, I haven't made like a 10% dent in natural wine. I just enjoy drinking it a lot. That's my thing.
Quarantine's like, now I have the time to do it whenever I feel like.
Pretty much stocked up.
That's awesome. So where can people find you? Underwoodcoffee.com.
Yep.
What's your what's the Insta handle?
Just Underwood Coffee.
Underwood Coffee. Oh.
Yep. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy. Underwood Coffee at Underwood Coffee. Instagram,
Facebook, Underwood Coffee. We should pop up. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I'll put that in the show notes so people can find you.
Awesome.
Excellent roast I'm drinking right now. I'm excited for the one that you brought me.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in. We scheduled this yesterday.
Yeah.
Here's the third person thing again. I was like, I got to get you on the podcast. When are you going to be in the cities? You're like, tomorrow I'm picking up coffee. I was like, I guess come on by. This is awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming in. I'll end it like I end every other episode and say, have a nice day.